What if, instead of just living your life, something is calling out to you right now, trying to get your attention through reality itself, and you haven't even noticed? What if every odd coincidence, every unexplained chill, every feeling that there's more to this is really the universe's subtle way of tapping you on the shoulder and saying, wake up? Carl Gustav Jung spent his life observing these kinds of movements. While many saw only isolated events, he saw an invisible web. For him, life wasn't a random sequence of disconnected events. It's a tapestry, and every thread you pull on one side affects many others you can't yet see. Nothing important happens to you by accident. Everything carries meaning, even when the mind can't grasp it. Have you ever felt a change coming before anything actually happened? An indescribable unease, a strange sensation in your chest, a premonition that life couldn't stay the same much longer. Jung would regard this with deep respect. He wouldn't call it drama or exaggeration. He'd call it a message. In his view, there's a constant dialogue between what you call your inner world and outer world. They're not two separate worlds. They're two sides of the same reality. What you feel, dream, and sense isn't disconnected from the encounters, losses, and opportunities in your path. What seems like just an external event is often a response to something silent that has been resonating in your soul for a long time. Think about how many times you've ignored that subtle discomfort, that intuition telling you, don't go, don't stay, don't accept, don't betray yourself. How many times have you chosen the easier, more logical, more acceptable route, only to have life somehow pull you back to the place you were trying to escape? Jung would say this force correcting your course isn't just blind fate. It's a deeper intelligence working to preserve what's true within you. What set Jung apart wasn't a detached interest in the human mind, but a reverence for the unseen dimension of existence. He believed that behind every crisis, every significant coincidence, and every sense of emptiness is a call to something greater. Not greater in terms of fame or achievement, but in terms of depth. As if life is constantly asking, do you want to keep living on the surface? Or are you ready to dive deeper? Maybe you're at that point right now. Nothing catastrophic has happened yet, but you feel something building up like storm clouds before a downpour. The routine continues. Work goes on. Relationships persist, but a part of you is no longer there. You look in the mirror and feel there's something inside you that hasn't seen the light of day. And that bothers you, tires you out, weighs on you. Jung would say this weight isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of birth. Before any birth, there's pressure, discomfort, fear. The old life no longer fits, and the new hasn't yet emerged. You're in between. It's in this in-between space that the universe starts to intensify its signals. Nothing too blatant, nothing too obvious. But enough for you to notice that there's some kind of hidden pattern organizing things that, by common logic, shouldn't fit together so well. Maybe you've noticed this in small details. You think of someone, and soon after, they reappear. A persistent thought about changing some aspect of your life appears, and suddenly a video, a book, a conversation points you in that exact direction. Certain words repeat, certain themes return, certain symbols follow you. You try to dismiss it as coincidence, but something in you knows it's not just that. This is where Jung's perspective becomes almost unsettling yet liberating. He saw these movements as signs of a deeper order, not explained by numbers or equations, but by meaning. It's not an external force manipulating puppets. It's something within you and at the same time beyond you, as if life itself wants to understand itself through your story. Now imagine the possibility that you're not just at the mercy of events, but engaged in a kind of secret conversation with the universe. A conversation that doesn't happen in direct sentences, but in symbols, dreams, encounters, disruptions, repetitions. What if, in truth, what you call luck or misfortune is part of an invisible teaching method? A way of preparing your soul for something it's not yet ready to sustain. If that's the case, the question changes. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? It might be more honest to ask, what is this trying to show me? This shift in perspective is profoundly Jungian. It takes you out of the role of a passive victim and places you as a participant in a journey that has meaning, even when it seems unfair, strange, or painful. You can choose not to believe. You can treat everything as mere coincidence, as noise. But what if, by doing so, you're closing the door to one of the most precious experiences a human being can have? Realizing you're not completely alone in your own story, that there's a thread, a core, a hidden direction pulling you, even when you think you're lost. Jung said that when you start noticing these signs, you don't gain control over life, but you gain a new kind of trust. Not the trust of someone who knows what's going to happen, but of someone who intuits that there's a purpose unfolding, even in the chaos. This doesn't eliminate pain, fear, or doubt, but it gives them a different contour. It's no longer senseless absurdity, but part of a journey. In this video, we're going to explore this territory, the signs that the universe is about to bring you something big, seen through the lens of Carl Gustav Jung. Not as easy promises, but as profound clues. Maybe you're already receiving these signs and haven't realized it. Maybe you're in one of the most important moments of your life without knowing how to name what's happening. Throughout this journey, you'll be invited to look at your restlessness with new eyes, to reconsider your coincidences, to reinterpret your losses, to honor your need for silence, and to respect your own dreams. Not as irrelevant details, but as messages. The question is, are you willing to consider that none of this is random? Are you willing, even if only for a few minutes, to treat your own life as a text full of symbols, waiting to be read? If the answer, even cautiously, is yes, then keep going. Because what comes next isn't just a list of signs, it's a mirror. And maybe by looking into it, you'll discover that what you called chaos was actually the beginning of a much deeper order, trying to emerge. The first sign might not show up as a miracle, but as a discomfort. And that's exactly why many overlook it. It's not a light in the sky or a mysterious voice calling your name. It's something much simpler, yet deeply unsettling. One day, you wake up, look at your life, and feel it no longer fits. Picture someone who seems to have everything just right. A steady job, an okay relationship, friends, a routine that's all sorted out. Nothing tragic has happened. Yet suddenly, they start waking up with a heaviness in their chest. They get up, get ready, do everything as they always have. But it feels like they're playing a role that no longer makes sense. The coffee tastes the same, the commute is the same, the conversations are the same. But inside, something's shifted. They can't believe in their own character anymore. Jung would pay close attention to this scene. For him, this discomfort isn't frivolous or ungrateful. It's a sign that something inside this person has grown, and the life they're living has become too small. It's like trying to wear clothes from childhood. You might squeeze into them, but you can't move. Everything's tight, uncomfortable, limiting. You might know this feeling well. It could be at work when you walk into the office and silently wonder, what am I doing here? Not because the environment is necessarily bad, but because you feel you're exchanging your life for something that doesn't touch what's most true in you. It might be in a relationship that's seemingly fine, but the conversation no longer nourishes you, and the planned future no longer aligns with who you feel you are now. Sometimes, this unease shows up in small gestures. You start getting irritated by things you used to accept easily. You get tired sooner, lose enthusiasm for activities that once seemed fun. Everything begins to feel like empty repetition. You already know how the day will end before it even starts. And what might seem like security to some starts to feel like a prison to you. Jung said that when the soul wants to change direction, it doesn't ask for your rational opinion. It simply starts to manifest, first as a mild discomfort, then as deep fatigue, then as a sense of absurdity. At one point, you fiercely defended the life you have. Suddenly, you catch yourself thinking, I don't see myself here in a few years. And that silent realization scares you. In many transformation stories, this is the invisible turning point. Nothing has changed on the outside, but inside, a line has been crossed. A woman who always dreamed of climbing the corporate ladder starts daydreaming about leaving it all to open a small studio. A man who prided himself on being strong and rational begins to get emotional over simple things and feels embarrassed by it. A young person who always followed the path laid out by their parents starts feeling an enormous emptiness at the thought of continuing down that road. You can try to stifle this voice. Tell yourself it's just a phase, just fatigue, just a lack of vacation. Have a stronger coffee. Dive into distractions. Fill your schedule to avoid thinking. But as Jung intuited, what's coming from deep within won't be satisfied with quick fixes. The feeling returns, sometimes softer, sometimes more intense. You might be able to delay it, but you can't kill this call. At times, this unease mixes with guilt. You look around and think, shouldn't I be grateful? Many people would love to have what I have, and that makes everything even more uncomfortable. Because besides feeling out of place, you feel wrong for feeling that way. However, from a Jungian perspective, the issue isn't about deserving or comparing. It's about truth. Something in you is yearning for a life more aligned with who you truly are, not who others expect you to be. Sometimes this voice pops up in simple daily situations. You're stuck in traffic listening to some random song, and suddenly you get a flash. An old memory of a dream you abandoned, an image of a place you've always wanted to live, a desire to start fresh. Within seconds, your rational mind butts in. Don't be crazy. That's not realistic. But the damage is done. You've seen it. You've felt it. For a moment, you glimpse the idea of another possible life. Jung saw this type of experience as a movement from the unseen into consciousness, as if a part of you, long dormant, decided it no longer wants to remain in the shadows. It starts sending images, desires, discomforts. It disrupts what was in order, but that order was only on the surface. The discomfort is the price of having touched a more authentic part of yourself. And here's an interesting detail. The more you try to convince yourself that everything's fine, the more everyday details seem to contradict you. It could be an overheard conversation, someone talking about exactly what you're afraid to admit. It could be a movie that feels like it's all about your life. It could be an offhand comment on social media that hits right at what you've been trying to hide from yourself. Each little shock like this increases the feeling that you can't go back to how things were. This is where the tension builds, because you find yourself at an internal point of no return, but without the courage yet to change things on the outside. You keep going to the same place, seeing the same people, doing the same tasks, but inside, part of you has already started saying goodbye. You don't know exactly to what or where you're headed, but you know that if you keep ignoring this call, something in you will slowly die. Jung didn't romanticize this process. He knew how distressing it could be to feel like a stranger in your own life, but he also believed that this discomfort is the first sign that something greater is approaching. Not a neatly wrapped gift, but a journey. A passage toward a life that makes more sense to your soul. Maybe you're in that middle ground right now. You haven't started any concrete changes, but you can't settle like before. You feel like throwing everything up in the air, but something holds you back. You feel like crying without knowing why. You feel like disappearing for a few days and coming back different. All this, in a Jung-inspired reading, isn't madness. It's a symptom of an inner birth. And when this birth begins, the universe rarely stops at just making you restless. It starts to respond. It moves around you. It reflects back through events what you're feeling inside. It's at this point that coincidences start to become too strange to be mere coincidences. And that's when you realize this unease isn't just yours. It's also the world rearranging itself around you, as if answering a call you didn't dare to make out loud. This is where something even more unsettling begins to unfold. When the unease inside you can no longer be denied, the outside world, in some mysterious way, seems to respond. You think of someone you haven't seen in years, and hours later they pop up on your screen. You feel stuck in a dead-end job, and on that very day, you stumble upon a quote on a wall, in a book, or in a random post about having the courage to start anew. You feel an inexplicable void, and out of nowhere, you discover a song that perfectly captures what you couldn't put into words. How many times has this happened to you? And you just shrugged it off, saying, coincidence. In Jung's view, these episodes aren't just curious accidents. He saw them as a kind of response from the universe to your inner state. When your inner world becomes intense enough, the reality around you begins to rearrange itself in strangely meaningful ways. This isn't about movie magic or a fixed, unchangeable destiny, but a subtle dialogue between what you feel and what life gives back to you. It's like silently admitting a truth inside yourself and touching an invisible thread that runs through everything. Consider an ordinary day, when you're especially tired of pretending everything's fine. You don't say a word to anyone and just carry the weight inside. In the middle of the day, someone you barely know looks at you and asks, with rare sincerity, "Are you really okay?" Or you're about to accept something you know deep down isn't right for you, and an unexpected event prevents it from happening. You get frustrated, but later realize that obstacle was a kind of silent protection. Is it really just luck or misfortune? Or is there a quiet intelligence crafting coincidences that gently push you out of places you insist on staying? What if these coincidences are more like mirrors than accidents? Jung noticed that when someone approaches a turning point, repetitions begin to intensify. It's not just strange external events, but patterns forming. You start noticing the same number on clocks, license plates, receipts. You get the same message from different voices. A friend, a video, a line in a book, all talking about the same kind of change, the same type of choice. A symbol keeps returning. A butterfly, an animal, a word. You try to ignore it, but it keeps reappearing, as if saying, "Look at me. I'm trying to show you something." Imagine someone secretly thinking about moving abroad, but too afraid to admit it even to themselves. Suddenly, they find themselves surrounded by people talking about travel, opportunities overseas, stories of bravery. At first, they find it amusing. Then it starts to bother them because these stories poke at the place they try to keep dormant. Another example. Someone is contemplating ending a relationship, but keeps putting off the decision. Suddenly, they start seeing movies and hearing stories about breakups leading to more authentic lives. None of this lands in their lap by accident. Life seems determined to bring to the surface what they try to keep buried. Why do some people notice these signs while others don't? Perhaps the difference lies not in the events themselves, but in the willingness to see them as more than noise. Those completely closed off, afraid of any change, tend to dismiss everything as trivial. But those who start admitting, despite their fear, that they need something different tend to find meaning where they once saw only chance. Jung didn't suggest the world revolves around our ego, but believed there's a kind of correspondence between our inner state and the situations that surround us. The closer you get to yourself, the more the world seems to speak your language. There's an interesting twist. These coincidences aren't always good news. Sometimes they are uncomfortable situations that repeat almost irritatingly. You change jobs, cities, relationships, but the same feelings of abandonment, undervaluation, rejection keep cropping up. Different people, different settings, same storyline. This isn't just persistent bad luck, according to Jung. It's an internal script projected outward, asking you to recognize and heal something you've carried for a long time. Until you learn the lesson, life insists on the same scene, just with a different cast. What if the patterns that hurt you the most are also persistent messages calling for transformation? When you start opening up to this way of seeing, your perception changes. A delay is no longer just a delay. It becomes a chance to notice who showed up, what thoughts came up, what you avoided. A casual encounter is no longer just that. It's something to be investigated with curiosity. Why did this person appear now? What do they remind you of? What do they awaken in you that you weren't acknowledging? This isn't about seeing signs everywhere out of paranoia, but about developing a sensitivity to life, like reading a book full of important details between the lines. Picture yourself walking down the street, lost in your thoughts, and in a moment of angst, you think, "I don't know who I am anymore." Minutes later, you pass a store window with a sign that reads, "Rediscover who you are." This doesn't solve your life, but it gives you a little jolt, a shiver. Where did that phrase come from at that exact moment? You can dismiss it, you can laugh it off, or you can embrace the idea that life just highlighted with a neon marker the theme you've been avoiding. Sometimes, the signs come through people you don't even like very much. Someone makes a harsh criticism that, despite the sting, hits on a truth you know deep down. Another person, completely different from you, does the thing you're afraid to do, and just watching them fills you with a mix of envy and admiration. This is also a kind of mirror. It's as if the universe uses even those who irritate you to show you what's missing in your story. What would happen if you treated these coincidences as invitations rather than random curiosities? At this juncture, the experience can become so intense it feels like the whole world is in sync with something stirring inside you. You're thinking about changing fields, and suddenly 3 different courses on that subject pop up in a few days. You're considering starting your own business, and you start meeting people who are exactly in that phase. You feel the urge to retreat, and unexpectedly, commitments start getting canceled, creating the space for solitude you've been claiming you don't have time for. This doesn't mean everything will be easy, nor is the universe a service counter fulfilling all your wishes. Often, these signs aren't meant to simplify your life, but to reveal where you're betraying yourself. Sometimes, what you impulsively want is the opposite of what your soul needs. And the coincidences in these cases don't validate your whims. They expose the mistake, pull down the mask, dismantle the illusion. What if it's not about getting what you want, but about recognizing what you really need, even if it contradicts your plans? Jung understood that this process can make anyone uncomfortable, because as coincidences intensify, you start losing the illusion that you're completely in control. At the same time, you begin to sense that you're not just a pawn of chance either. You're somewhere in between. A participant, not just an observer. A co-author, not merely a victim. This challenges your pride, your fears, your sense of security. When signs start aligning, you're faced with an intimate choice. Treat everything as noise and go back to sleep, or admit that maybe there's a secret thread leading you to a more authentic place. You don't have to fully understand this thread or give it a precise name. Just acknowledge that if reality is persistently nudging you, maybe it's not the time to turn away. As these coincidences repeat and intensify, something else begins to happen behind the scenes of your life. Certain people, places, and situations can no longer remain. Not out of drama, but because if the inner narrative changes, sooner or later, the external cast needs to change too. And it's here that the universe, often quietly and even painfully, begins to remove from the stage everything that's already served its purpose in your story. This is when life starts to feel oddly quiet. Not the peaceful silence of a sunset, but the kind of silence that feels like something is being taken away from the backdrop of your story. After all the internal unrest and persistent coincidences, you begin to notice a subtle yet definite shift. Certain people, places, and situations start drifting away without big explanations, dramatic arguments, or clear reasons to share with others. Sometimes it begins with something simple. That friend you used to talk to every day now responds with delays. The conversations lose their spark, and meetings become less frequent. There's no falling out, just a cooling off you can't quite explain. Or maybe it's that job that used to be the center of your life. Suddenly, projects are canceled, plans change, and your role loses its significance. You're still there, but it feels like the very structure is gently nudging you to leave, even if no one says it out loud. Often, this phase is accompanied by coincidences that seem harsh but are precise in their outcome. Someone shares that just as they started feeling the need to move to a new city, their landlord put their home on the market without warning. Another person admits that when they finally accepted their relationship was over, an external event made continuing as a couple impossible. These are like clean cuts and stories that had worn out, but you kept dragging them along out of fear or attachment. It feels uncomfortable, like a series of losses. Invitations dwindle, groups dissolve, old plans lose their meaning. Suddenly, that social circle that seemed solid reveals itself as fragile, held together more by habit than real connection. People you thought would be by your side forever start going their own ways. There's no grand explanation, just a growing distance. You try to reach out, schedule meetups, rekindle conversations, but everything feels forced, heavy, artificial. Instead of seeing this as pure rejection, Jung would invite you to consider another perspective. What if what's leaving isn't being ripped away from you, but is simply returning to its rightful place? What if life isn't punishing you, but clearing space that you've been reluctant to empty? Think about how many things you hold on to out of fear of having nothing. Friendships that exist only out of nostalgia. Relationships sustained by habit. Jobs that continue purely out of resignation. When the soul decides to grow, these kinds of supports start to crumble. It's interesting to note that in many stories, people can't see this at the moment. They just feel like everything is falling apart at once. They lose their job, drift away from friends, clash with family, watch old plans fail in quick succession. It seems like a streak of bad luck. Years later, looking back, the same person admits that if one of those structures had remained, they probably wouldn't have had the courage to take the leap they did. It's as if life removed the old ladders to force them to discover they knew how to fly. Sometimes the distancing is even more subtle. You keep seeing the same people, going to the same places, but feel an increasing strangeness. Conversations that once felt fun now seem hollow. The jokes no longer bring genuine laughter. The environment exhausts you more than it nourishes you. You go home feeling like you've spent too much energy maintaining a version of yourself that no longer matches what you feel inside. There hasn't been a break, but there's been a shift. You're there, but you're not really there. One curious observation is that many people report feeling as though they're being pulled out of situations during this phase. It's like doors that seem solid start closing on their own. Projects get cut. Invitations stop coming. Seemingly certain opportunities fall apart in unexpected ways. At first, you might see this as failure, but it's worth asking. Aren't these the very doors you secretly didn't want to walk through? How many times have you wished for a way out, and when it came abruptly, you called it unfair? Jung saw this movement as part of an inevitable transformation process. Before something new can arrive, the ground needs to be cleared. A forest doesn't regenerate without some old trees falling to let the light reach the ground. The same goes for life, both inside and out. There are relationships that stopped growing long ago, but that you maintain because you're afraid of facing temporary emptiness. There are activities that only drain you, but that you tolerate because you're scared to say enough. When this fear starts hindering your growth too much, life steps in, and this intervention often doesn't wait for your comfortable timing. It comes on its own schedule. You might feel not ready, and yet something ends. You might swear you could make it work, right? And still, what you were holding on to slips through your fingers. This wounds your pride. You feel the urge to rush back, rebuild what's fallen, hold on to someone who's gone, resume a job you knew had no future. But with a bit more honesty, you realize these cracks have been there for a while. There's also an internal distancing. You might stay in the same relationship or position, but you start noticing you can't react the same way anymore. What once controlled you doesn't have the same hold. People who had immense power over your mood lose that control. You see the game, recognize the pattern, and feel a certain weariness. It's not intense anger, it's exhaustion. The urge to argue, to prove something, to convince, wanes. Instead, there's a growing desire to to protect yourself, to retreat, to not waste energy. This inner shift, without you noticing, naturally distances what fed off your old stance. People who like seeing you always available, always yielding, start getting uncomfortable with your no. Environments that thrived on competition or drama begin to find you distant, strange, different. Gradually, you're nudged out of scenarios that demanded a version of yourself you can no longer sustain without harm. It may feel lonely, and often it is. You look around and notice many empty spaces where there used to be movement. Fewer messages, fewer invitations, fewer distractions. If you're paying attention, you'll notice that along with this external emptying, something rare emerges. Time. Time to think, to feel, to look at your life without so much noise. The problem is that this free time, at first, is intimidating. It exposes questions you've been avoiding. It leaves you face to face with yourself without so many curtains. Jung wouldn't call this spiritual abandonment, but necessary withdrawal. As if the universe is saying, I need you to be available inside for what's coming next. And as long as you're filling space with what's already dead, there's no room for the new. This logic is uncomfortable, but it makes sense when we think about it practically. If you're emotionally tied up with something or someone that no longer adds value to your life, how can you open yourself fully to what truly resonates with your essence? Maybe you're at this point right now, watching people drift away, situations dissolve, old plans lose their momentum, watching doors close one after another without understanding why. Everything in you wants to hold on, rebuild, prove you can keep it all together. But if just for a moment you entertain the idea that none of this is random, you might see a subtle thread connecting all these losses. They have been removing, one by one, the structures that kept you from moving forward. And it's precisely when this quiet clearing reaches a certain level that a new desire starts to emerge, almost like a natural reflex. The deep urge to step away from the noise, to be alone, to understand who you are, without all these roles, people, and stories slipping through your fingers. The universe isn't just taking away. It's guiding you to a place where, for the first time in a long while, you can hear your own voice without interference. When life starts to empty out on the outside, something inevitable happens within. You feel an almost urgent need to be alone. It's no longer just a simple desire for me time. It's an insistent, almost physical call to step away from the noise, opinions, and roles you've been playing. Invitations that once excited you now feel burdensome. Messages you used to reply to promptly go unanswered. You're not angry at anyone or hating the world. You just feel a need to pull back from it all. At first, this might confuse you. You might wonder if you're becoming cold, odd, or antisocial. You might even fear you're slipping into something negative, like a deep sadness. But if you look honestly, you'll see this desire for solitude has a different quality. It's not about escape. It's about seeking. You don't just want to move away from others. You want to get closer to something inside you that never had the space to be truly heard. After so many changes and losses, you finally realize the only voice you haven't really listened to is your own. This is when small shifts occur. You cancel a meeting because you're tired, and instead of feeling guilty, you feel relieved. You opt out of a shallow conversation, and for the first time, it doesn't feel like you're missing out on something important. You stay home on a night when you usually go out, and in the quiet of your room, something different happens. Thoughts you've been pushing away become clear. Forgotten memories return. Old questions resurface. It's uncomfortable, but it's real. The tension grows when people around you start noticing these changes. Friends might say, "You've disappeared. You're acting strange. What's going on with you?" Family might see it as coldness. Someone might even feel rejected. You try to explain, but realize it's hard to put into words something you're still figuring out yourself. The natural impulse is to give in, go back to how things were. Say, "Sure, I'll be there." Even though inside, that presence takes a heavy toll. This is where Jung's perspective becomes essential. He saw this need for withdrawal as a sacred part of the process. It's when you stop just reacting to the world and start moving toward your own center. If life has been pulling you outward all the time, now something deep is calling you inward. It's not a comfortable invitation because it involves facing everything that's been suppressed. But it's in the silent dive that the biggest shifts are prepared. Imagine someone who's always been the problem solver in the family. Always available, always strong, always ready to listen to everyone but themselves. Suddenly, this person finds they simply don't have the energy to hold everything together anymore. They start saying no. They let messages go unanswered. They spend more time in silence. On the outside, it might look like coldness. Inside, it's survival. It's the moment they realize that if they keep abandoning themselves, they'll completely fall apart. During this phase, daily life takes on a different hue. Walks that were once just a way to get from point A to point B become moments of internal dialogue. Showers turn into pauses for reflection. A simple trip to the store becomes an opportunity to observe your own thoughts. You start noticing new reactions in yourself. You realize, for example, that you can leave a heated discussion before getting too hurt. You find yourself wanting to cry for no clear reason, as if something old is finally finding a way to surface. And it's here that a quiet yet powerful shift often occurs. Your dreams begin to change. They become more vivid, more intense, filled with images you can't forget upon waking. You dream of unknown houses, locked rooms, doors opening, people you haven't seen in years, situations that seem to carry a coded message. You wake with a racing heart, feeling like you've lived another life overnight. Jung devoted much of his life to viewing dreams as a direct channel between the conscious mind and the deeper parts of ourselves. And it's during this period of withdrawal that this channel tends to become more active. During the day, you step away from the excess stimuli. At night, this cleared space is filled with symbolic narratives that try to organize what's happening within you. It's as if your inner life says, "Now that you've given me silence, I can finally speak." You might dream of being lost in an unfamiliar city and gradually finding your path. You could dream of water, rivers, rain, turbulent seas. You might dream of fire, something burning, transforming, renewing. You might dream of returning to childhood places, encountering people long gone, facing old fears embodied by strange figures. You don't need to be an expert to see. These dreams are showing you, through stories, what's going on inside. The tension grows as you wake up with questions you never had before. Why did I dream about that? Why did that person show up? Why did that house feel so familiar when I've never been there? Instead of just dismissing them, you start to remember. You jot them down, record a voice memo, think about them during the day, And without realizing it, you begin to take more seriously what your own soul tries to tell you while your body rests. Over time, certain dreams begin to repeat with small variations. A door that was locked opens a little more. A dark path gains a light at the end. An enemy seems less threatening. This shows that something within you is changing too. The internal storyline is being rewritten. Jung noted that before major external transformations, dreams often rehearse the change. They train you, prepare the ground, test scenarios, introduce symbols that will accompany you in waking life. In some cases, dreams even seem to predict events. You dream of an important conversation, and days later, it happens in a similar way. You dream of a place, and sometime after, you find yourself there without having planned it. You dream of someone you haven't seen in a long time, and shortly after, they appear with news that impacts your path. This can be startling, and even feel supernatural, but in Jung's view, it's just more evidence that the line between inside and outside is much finer than it seems. Amidst all this, you might feel like you're losing your mind a bit. Fewer people around you, more silence, more intense dreams, more unanswered questions. But notice, along with the fear, a new kind of clarity also emerges. You start to clearly see what you no longer want to experience. You begin naming wounds you've always carried. You start to uncover desires that were hidden beneath everything others expected of you. It's as if you're dismantling an old house brick by brick while simultaneously beginning to imagine a new house. More aligned with who you truly are, the process is chaotic and often lonely. But there's something different this time. For the first time, you're not trying to distract yourself from your own life. You're facing it head on with all its imperfections, pain, beauty, and possibility. And it's exactly at this point when the silence has grown stronger, the dreams more intense, and the solitude more real, that something begins to align invisibly around you. As if life has been waiting for this exact moment of radical honesty with yourself to move the next pieces. What follows this preparation isn't small. It's not a minor change. It's something that can redefine how you see yourself, how you relate, how you move through the world. And it's here that all those signs, coincidences, distances, and dreams start to make sense as parts of the same announcement. The universe is ready to give you something big, but it needed to transform who you are inside first, so you can truly receive it. If you've made it this far, you might have realized that nothing discussed is just theoretical, detached from your life. Somewhere along this journey, you likely saw yourself in the restlessness without explanation, the recurring coincidences, the people and situations that drifted away, the deep desire to be alone, and the dreams that began to speak more loudly. If this resonates with you, don't treat it as a minor detail. Jung would say that when something in a message truly touches you, it's not because you've learned something new, but because you've recognized something you already knew inside and hadn't dared to acknowledge. The question now isn't whether the signs exist, but what you'll do with them. The universe can whisper, repeat, or even shout in the form of a crisis, but no real change happens if you stay stuck in the same internal place. It's not about waiting for something magical to happen externally. It's about becoming different inside so that whatever comes has a place to land. Imagine trying to catch a heavy rain with closed hands. You might feel a few drops, but you'll never quench your thirst. So what can you do? Practically, from here on out. First, stop treating what you feel as a mistake. If there's restlessness, there's a reason. Instead of judging yourself for being tired, lost, or confused, try viewing it as a signal. Ask yourself, honestly, in what area of my life am I betraying myself? Where am I clinging to something that's already dead inside? What role am I continuing to play just because I'm afraid of disappointing others? These questions aren't comfortable, but they are the starting point for any genuine new beginning. Next, start paying attention to the coincidences crossing your path. Not to force meaning into everything, but to not waste clear messages. When something repeats too often, when a theme returns in different forms, pause and observe. What is this trying to show me? What change is this pattern asking for? If you prefer, write it down. Keep a journal, a note on your phone, any place where you can record events that catch your attention. Unexpected encounters, phrases that touch you, situations that seem improbable. Over time, a pattern will emerge. At the same time, have the courage to let go of what's leaving. This is harder than it sounds because it means accepting that certain stories won't continue as you imagined. But holding on to what's already gone robs you of the chance to receive what's on the way. If someone has drifted away without you hurting them, if a job ended despite your efforts, if a chapter closed without your approval instead of fighting blindly against it, try asking a different question. What space is this loss opening up in me? What part of me was being stifled by this situation? Then, honor your need for silence. Carve out time, even if it's brief, to be with yourself without distractions. Walk without headphones, have a coffee without your phone in hand, sit quietly and just breathe. At first it might seem pointless or even uncomfortable because the world has taught you to always fill your time with noise. But it's in the apparent uselessness of these moments that your soul finds an opening to speak. And if you're willing to listen, you'll find that many answers you seem to be seeking outside were always within you, just waiting for you to quiet down a bit. Don't underestimate the power of your dreams either. From now on, if you can, keep a notebook or your phone by your bed. When you wake up from an intense dream, jot down a few words, even if they seem confusing. Don't try to interpret everything immediately. Just record it. After a few days or weeks, read through them. You might start to notice repetitions, symbols, recurring situations. They're not there to scare you, but to guide you. Silently ask the dream, what do you want to tell me? Even if the answer doesn't come right away, you're gradually opening a channel of communication with your deeper self. You might think, but I'm scared. Scared of change, of losing, of making mistakes. It's important to know that fear isn't proof you're on the wrong path. Often, it's evidence that you're stepping out of the prison you've grown accustomed to. Jung knew that no one goes through a true transformation without passing through shadowy areas. The big difference lies in how you relate to this fear. You can let it paralyze you, or you can walk with it, one step at a time, using it as a sign that you're approaching something alive. A simple way to start is by taking small steps toward alignment. Don't wait for a grand revolution. Ask yourself, what's the smallest action I can take today to honor what I feel? You might be saying no to something you've always accepted out of obligation. It might be taking a step toward a project that's been on the back burner. It could be having an honest conversation you've been postponing for years. Or it might be simply admitting something to yourself that you've always known but never had the courage to name. Each small act like this is a way of telling the universe, I'm listening. And when you start truly listening, something changes in the quality of your presence in the world. You don't become perfect or immune to pain, but you become more whole. And it's this wholeness that attracts situations, people, and opportunities more aligned with who you really are. What once seemed like luck now appears as consequence. What once seemed like misfortune becomes understood as realignment, a course correction. You stop living just in reaction and begin to actively participate in crafting your destiny. Remember that for Jung, before any great visible transformation, there's always a silent internal movement. You might be in that movement right now. You might not see anything grand happening outside yet, but you feel a revolution happening within. Don't underestimate this. The biggest changes start in the unseen. An intimate decision, a boundary set, a cry finally allowed, a dream taken seriously. This is how a new life begins, humble, understated, but firm. If the signs we've discussed resonated with you, if at any point you thought, this is exactly what I'm going through, understand, this is no accident. The universe doesn't waste energy sending messages to those not ready to hear them. If they've reached you, it's because, in some way, you're already prepared to take the next step, even if you don't yet know exactly what it is. And it's okay not to know. What's important is not going back to pretending you didn't see. So now, I want to invite you directly. Choose one thing, just one, that you'll do in the next 24 hours to honor this call. It could be writing down what you're feeling, starting something you've been putting off, deciding to close a chapter, or seeking help. The size doesn't matter. The truth does. Transformation doesn't begin when everything changes at once. It starts when you, in the midst of the same life as always, decide to act differently because something deeper has touched you. If this message resonated with you, if it stirred something you perhaps couldn't name, I ask for 3 simple gestures that make all the difference in ensuring this kind of content continues to exist. First, like this video. It shows the platform that this conversation has value and should reach more people. Second, comment below, even anonymously, sharing which part spoke to you most or what sign you're experiencing now. Your experience could be the mirror someone else needs. Third, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you won't walk this journey alone. The signs are there. The restlessness, the coincidences, the distancing, the silence, the dreams. The universe has already started the conversation. Now, it's your turn to respond.